I am so ready. Countdown, 3, 2, 1, and welcome to the... All right, everybody. Welcome back to episode 5 of the CIO Project. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, CIO extraordinaire, Brian Shield.
Great to be here, Howie.
And today, we're excited to tell you that we're coming from our new studio in Atlanta, GA, Between Pixels. And we thought we'd give a shout out to Josh and the gang over here, Between Pixels. They're a production and marketing company focused on content creation, and they are marketing experts. So remember them, Between Pixels, out here in the greater metro area of Atlanta, GA.
Well, you know, and I've had the opportunity to kind of work indirectly with Between Pixels for years as part of Sparcio, and they're remarkable. And if you've ever been to one of their events, you get a great sense of some of the quality of service they do and capabilities that they provide.
Right. So, I always have to keep in mind that outfits like this, we think of it as a studio. So we come in here into the studio, but they're out in the field all the time, doing all these crazy events. And I'm telling you,
super talented. One
of the things that I've gained a great appreciation for since we started doing this is how hard audio is. Right? Like you think of audio and video, right? And if anybody's done any kind of like even small time production, right?
Yeah.
The visual part of it is fine most of the time. It is trying to get audio right, like left and right. And
we should probably start this segment by doing an apology to Rob Strickland. Rob, we promise we're going to get this, our episode with you squared away.
You guys have actually heard us lament about this before, right? So we actually have shot 2 different shows with the same guest, and our audio has gone to shit.
It would never happen here, but
it would never happen here. So here we are. And the other thing too is this is the first time we've been in studio together.
Oh yeah, you're right. I didn't even notice. It's so funny. Yeah. We've known each other for so long. It didn't occur to me.
Yeah, I know. And it's so interesting because usually you're over there, but even with Rob, like in the other studio, he was sort of over on the other side of the table.
Oh yeah.
And now we're like right here.
Right.
Oh look.
It's real. It's tangible.
Well, right on. Moving on. Hey, reminder everybody, we have our website fired up. You can find us at CIOproject.com, CIOproject.com. You can watch our released episodes there, learn more about our hosts and guests, and drop us a line with any questions or topics you would like us to tackle in our upcoming episodes, as well as ideas and suggestions you have for the show. So we'd love to hear from you. Again, CIOproject.com. All right. Well, back by popular demand, we're doing our second sprint.
I love it.
Right?
I love it. These are fun.
So today on the sprint, we have the following topics. 1, the Trump administration is targeting the H1b Visa, the sacrosanct H1b Visa program that many of us in this business have relied on for a long, long time. And so we're gonna dive into that first. Yep. I think it's probably one of the hottest topics at the moment. We're going to talk about the Anthropic $1.5 billion settlement that went sideways. Salesforce layoffs. This might have a little something to do with AI. I don't know. We'll talk about that. Right? And CTO and CIO's ambition for the CEO role. This is a real interesting one for our audience right now about how this has shifted.
Yeah, we've got some friends who have made that transition, which is great for them and
almost unheard of a decade
historically.
Ago, right? Yeah, historically it's almost unheard of. And then we will wrap it up today with Sam Altman and the AI bubble and his conversation and his comments about that, which are very interesting, especially for those of us that were around in 2000.
History
us old guys were around in 2000. All right, let's start with the Trump administration targeting the H1b Visa thing. All right, so on September 19th of this year, so not too long ago, President Trump issued a presidential proclamation titled, quote, "Restriction on Entry of Certain Non-Immigrant Workers," end quote, targeting received abuses in the H1b program, such as displacing American workers with lower wage foreign labor and undermining national security. They go on to say that the policy introduces a steep $100,000 fee, not a fine, but a fee for new petitions and suspends most new entries unless exempted, aiming to prioritize U.S. workers while still allowing access to top global talent at a higher cost. So just the metadata on this right now. The announcement was made on September 19th. The effective date is September 21st, so that has come and gone, 2025. It applies to new petitions only, so if you're in place, you should be okay. And the duration is for 12 months, expires this time next year, so September 21st, 2026, unless extended. So that's kind of interesting, right? That it wasn't permanent. And then the FY, so if any of you, for those of you, and I'm sure many of you in this audience have been involved in the lottery program for the H1b Visa, that starts on October 1st, which is actually today. And all entries starting today require a $100,000 fee. So Brian, this is near and dear to your heart, I'm guessing.
It has been over the years.
Yeah, what say you?
Well, it's interesting. I think any of these types of policy changes are always, you kind of have a tendency to kind of agree with elements of it.
Okay.
It's like I look at it and I go like, yes, do we want to be fair, if you will, to U.S. workers? Absolutely. And do we want to give them as much opportunity as humanly possible? Definitely. There are absolutely some elements of this around saving money, that companies have been utilizing, for many, many years. There's other aspects. The national security one is also real, so and it places a premium, obviously, for some companies more than others, and that's a tricky slope. It's a
how does
slippery
that
slope
play out? Like, how does that play out? What does that look like?
Well, I think you bring somebody in under the auspices of being a software engineer, but they really are loyal to a different cause. So take it, for example, you work at Lockheed Martin, Boeing, a defense contractor, any of these different folks, right?
Right.
Even some, universities and things. So you have exposure to IP.
Right.
So it's really sort of just corporate espionage.
Well, and to be clear, the H1b visa has to do with us bringing overseas workers here on our soil.
Sure.
Right. And so much is outsourced to people that aren't on our soil and have access to all the same things. Right. So how are they differentiating between that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think when you're on, when you're onshore, I think that more of this is about, U.S. workers.
Yeah.
Right. Than it is probably the latter part of it about sort of, biggest concern being sort of corporate espionage.
Yeah,
you're right. Because there is elements of that you can be done almost anywhere. Right. Proximity does matter, though, too. I mean, having access to IP that isn't yours, it's certainly easier done sort of in presence, if you will. I mean, to me, I think the fundamental one comes down to supply and demand. We know that there is today a virtually limitless number of open positions that are not being filled. In many categories.
Especially in our industry.
100%. Whether it's we're talking technology, I guess, specifically right now. But, whether it's AI, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's certain key, technologies and things, there are lots and lots of positions that are going unfilled. There is, so to me, part of the question is going to be is like, does this sort of supply of U.S. workers, tech workers, let's assume for a moment,
right.
Unable to maybe find high-paying jobs, is that real, or is it maybe the bigger question that they fear is it more about sort of the dollar value element? In other words, I can secure some of these other folks, I can pay them half the money, and I can get maybe similar results. My suspicion is it's more that because at the end of the day, there are lots of positions, but I think a lot of companies too. The other thing that's very true is that a lot of companies, consulting companies in particular, have gotten way too comfortable with this model for way too many years. So it's almost just, it's become sort of their methodology for addressing, how do they basically, their whole staffing model is predicated around this whole thing.
Right.
And so, and obviously there's an ROI that goes along with all this. So, I understand why we're having this conversation. I give the administration credit for at least bringing it to attention,
right?
Because I think it's easier to sort of whistle past a graveyard on things like topics like this, and just sort of assume that hey, the way it's worked is the way it should work indefinitely.
Yeah, it's interesting that they put a 1-year term in this. So if you follow this administration much on any topic, this is kind of Trumponian in a way.
It is.
He throws things out there, right? And if and sees if it gets traction.
Yeah, I mean,
right? Or see what the fallout is, right?
Like
he's not
see
afraid.
What sticks.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. See what sticks.
And my suspicion is it'll get a year from now or sooner. It'll get revised and refined, and the hard thing I think at the federal government level is it's very difficult to do things incrementally. Just modest increments, I guess what I'm saying. So there's a tendency, I think, at least with this administration, to sort of like do kind of a broad, reach.
Yeah.
And then ratchet it back versus
right.
the other way, the other approach, if you will. So, I think there's some merit here. I think, the devil will be in the details. This is definitely one of those things that's going to have to get, vetted. And, I haven't worked at some of the companies that really kind of rely on this in a while.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to kind of talk to some of our peers and get a reaction from some of them.
Yeah, because I think people get freaked out about this stuff, but for the most part, it's a little bit, for most of us, par for the course, right? Like how do you see this impacting? Like say, how do you see this impacting you over the next year?
I don't know if it'll impact me directly. I can see if you rely heavily on consulting companies, large consulting companies that use this as a methodology for supplementing their staff.
Yeah.
There might be like fewer engagements that they can do.
Right.
Or they might argue that their rates are going to have to go up.
Right.
Because now they don't have sort of a lower cost basis, if you will.
Right.
So, I mean, I think your point before is the most important one, which is I think we're in a little bit of wait and see mode.
Yeah. I can imagine the applications are probably going to just drop like a rock.
I would think so. At 100,000, I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah. People are going to just wait and see what happens, right?
I think that's likely. Then I think what we'll see is there a massive uptick in hiring?
Mm-hmm. In the States.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And do people feel like maybe they haven't been fair?
Right.
And
so non-immigrant labor.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we'll learn lots of things from this.
Okay.
It's just, what that period's going to look like between now and a year from now is going to be interesting and challenging for many companies.
Yeah, fantastic. So we'll keep our eye on it.
Absolutely.
And we'll report on it as it goes.
Yeah, it's a good topic.
Let's talk about Anthropic, the $1.5 billion settlement, right? So this is not ChatGPT. This is Anthropic, right? So this is from the Journal Advocate by Michael Ledke and Matt O'Brien, who are AP technology writers. And out of San Francisco, they wrote that a federal judge on Monday, so this was a couple Mondays ago, skewered a $1.5 billion settlement between the artificial intelligence company Anthropic and authors who allege nearly $500,000 have been illegally pirated to train chatbots, raising the specter that the case could still end up going to trial. After spending nearly an hour mostly lambasting a settlement that he believes is full of pitfalls, U.S. District Judge William Alsup scheduled another hearing in San Francisco on September 25 to review whether his concerns had been addressed. So what's going on here, Brian?
Yeah, this is this happens to be Anthropic, but it could be like fill in the blank,
right?
Generative AI company, right? I mean, the reality is that like we went through, it wasn't that long ago with singers and songwriters. If you go back to the day, we were kind of moving away from traditional vinyl and CDs and stuff, and moving more toward digital.
All the pirating of songs and all that.
There's always going to be a shakeout period with new technology, and this one, listen, like I don't know that we would have had sort of the explosion of generative AI had some of these companies not sort of just assumed that whatever's out there is somewhat in the public domain a little bit, right? And so now it's like they built their companies. If they had started this business saying like, I'm going to need $1.5 billion to work with media companies to settle lawsuits, people might be like, I think I'm not going to make that investment.
Yeah.
They
probably didn't think about it that way either.
I don't think so. No, but I'm certain that they knew there was a risk.
Yeah.
We've already heard the same thing from OpenAI. We've heard the same thing from others. And then there's always argument about what's public domain and what's not in the public domain. But in my mind, there's legitimacy to all this. I mean, you've got, folks out there in all sorts of different, whether it's, authors or artists or other sort of folks, creative folks that have created really, remarkable content. And they they should have the rights to be able to leverage that, and as a form of income for them. If they decide that they want to sort of settle with some companies, that's great. But, it is a little bit of a lane grab right now. And so trying a little bit like the trombone we were just talking about. I mean, I think there's another kind of shot across the bow, if you will, about sort of how some of these different like AI and this generative AI is operated and assumptions that a lot of these companies have made, to get to basically fuel their success. And so, I sort of, none of this is unexpected. I think everyone has known for many years that this, or months and years, that this was. That
well,
this
in AI months or years.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In AI months, which is really years.
So there's no surprise here. This is just a question of, there is some precedent, which is what I think people are more concerned about. What precedents are being set here by Anthropic and OpenAI and others that will have impact to other smaller companies, and what impact will that have ultimately on the growth of the business?
Well, this story is not over, right?
No, it's just beginning in some respects.
Do you expect there to be class action that goes after kind of like all of them?
My suspicion is that these companies are going to have to allocate some significant portion of their revenue to
get this all worked out, right?
100%. Yeah. No different than the music industry, right? Like at the end of the day, there's a reason why we can like download music from Spotify and other things, and You know, if you
Right.
think going
That's a good
back, like,
analogy,
we're
yeah.
paying like $1 for a song and different things, but you know, it's not a surprise because obviously our audience is, anyone that's had vinyl records knows that there was a time there too where artists would put up music, and you might have, one or two tracks in the entire, who knows, 14 to 18 songs that you actually liked. And so
Right.
a lot of these things happen because you can, the way the evolution of technology evolves and the way in demand, supply and demand.
Yeah.
And so this one's no different. I think we'll learn a lot from it, and I think it'll have financial implications to other LLMs in the future.
If the digital music analogy was a freight train that they couldn't stop, right? And they had to get about, this is like 10 freight trains, right? Like
Yeah,
it's not slowing down, right?
No, and it's
yeah,
complicated too if you think about it, because you think of just the massive trove of data
Right.
that has been consumed,
Right.
and how do you put a value on that?
Right,
And
right.
then how do you reimburse? It's obvious. It makes sense where you you basically scoured through the, I don't know, information from, who knows, New York Times or some other,
Right.
where you can actually identify its source. But when you're pulling in all sorts of data from, who knows, myriads of different data sources, trying to create sort of a methodology for, payback.
Right.
I don't know how you do that.
Right. Could you see? I mean, is this impossible? But could you see a situation where a judge basically just puts a halt on these LLM companies? Like literally orders them to, like a stop.
Cease and desist?
Yeah, cease and desist.
I mean,
I've wondered about this for a little while.
It's conceivable. I would suspect not,
Right.
but I don't pretend to be an attorney. Who knows?
Yeah,
It could come down to that at the end.
Yeah.
A bit of a threat.
Right. Well, this is another one we'll have
More
to
to
keep our
come.
eye-
Yeah, no,
more to come. We'll have to
This
keep our
is
eyes off on.
early stage.
All right, number 3, Salesforce layoffs. Got Josh following along with us. All right, we got a CNBC report. Article headline reads, Salesforce CEO confirms 4,000 layoffs. Quote, because I need less heads with AI. This is what everybody's been worried about, right? The article goes on to say, Salesforce has cut 4,000 of its customer support roles. CEO Mark Benioff recently said while discussing how artificial intelligence has helped reduce the company headcount. Benioff revealed the layoffs during an interview published Friday on the Logan Bartlett Show podcast. Quote, I've reduced it from 9,000 heads to about 5,000 because I need less heads, Benioff said while discussing the impact of AI on Salesforce operations. So
yeah, well, we got a sneak peek at this one. We had
Yeah.
Val Shar on one of our early episodes.
Yeah.
Chief digital evangelist at Salesforce, and just a thought leader in the space of technology and adoption. And he was talking about sort of how Salesforce has gone all in with agentic AI,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
he did.
every employee is expected to be able to create their own GPTs and be able to create agents and leverage those agents for different purposes and things. So they're going all in, which, I get it in their business, right? And if you think about it, I think the use case example he had used with us was that, I remember because I listened to this recently, but he was saying that during the best days of their call centers, working with, folks like us who are Salesforce customers and calling in with questions to their tier 1, tier 2 support groups, that at their best day, their best people could answer, I think the number was around 69% of tier 1 calls successfully without escalation.
right.
And you and I know that's a big number.
That's a big number.
That's a really big number in the support business. We've both been doing this for a long time. I want to say the last whack at this, those numbers for Salesforce were in the low 80s. That they could answer 80% of these things with trained agents responding to. And Val remember that he was talking about just the work that they had done with their CIO in terms of casting that broad net across the organization, looking for, information about how we solve these problems, and then now been applying it to answer these questions on behalf of customers like us.
Right.
And this is a tricky one because for customers like all of us, you would like to think that this also implies that maybe there's a little bit, downward pressure on price or escalation price or other sort of things. Maybe not just profit, on the side of the company. But this one's another one that's almost a little bit of to be expected, and I think there's another foreshadowing of more to come, especially in certain key areas. Like support is a good example, because if you're a company like Salesforce that's been around as long as they've been around, really the pioneer in cloud, they have so much information. They know every question that's effectively been asked by all of us as customers.
Right. Especially in their space, CRM space.
Yeah, and so it's not a big surprise that they know that, a generative AI, can easily provide answers for so many of these different questions. And so, it's a warning in my mind out there if you are, in your field, whether you're in this particular case call center, you're in other sort of areas within the technology business, but particularly in sort of the support side.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the work you do and think about it from a generative AI perspective, and how much does that touch your work? Are you multifaceted? Do you wear multiple hats, or are you singularly purposed? I wake up, I answer calls, I go home, type of thing. And it's a reality check for, I think, many of us that, this is another foreshadowing, 3 in a row, of more to come. And so if you're a young, talented technology individual, it's not to say don't pursue support fields, but it's like, I think it's don't be singularly focused on any one area. You need to be broadly disciplined, right? You need to have, whether it's development skills or networking skills or operational skills or other sort of characteristics that you bring to bear, so that the value add you bring to the organization, just continues to rise. Plus, when situations like this occur, you want to also be that standout employee who's the, use a sports metaphor, kind of like the gifted athlete, who takes their work seriously and wants to, pivot when they can, and, show signs of being able to do those things.
Well, my guess, too, is, to just be quite raw, is that the people who, what Vala talked about, every employee was challenged, if you will, to build agentic tools, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing that the 4,000 that lost their jobs are the ones that didn't
learn the tools?
Weren't the ones that were actually building the agentic tools. So in other words, to your point, to add to what you're saying, if you're the one that's actually
the target of the tools?
The one that's building the tools, the one that's putting them in place, the one that's innovating, right?
Yes.
That's how you make more opportunity for yourself.
But
and
for those listening would say, easier said than done, right? Because it takes time to get to that, even in any of our careers, no matter what we majored in, it's difficult sometimes to get to, where you're a creative contributor. Sometimes
and that was my thought, right?
And so there's inherent risk there, right? For certain key roles like this. And but none of us are immune on this too, if you think about it, right? Like, let's take another category like software development, right? Yeah. Like, if you're a company like the ones like I work for, it's like, we have a tremendous amount of work to do, and we need skilled software development labor to get there,
right?
And so generative AI to us is a productivity boost. It effectively means we can kind of do more, in the same amount of time that we could before, right? It means that we'd be, more creative. We can get a quicker start on some of our development capabilities. We can, accelerate QA. We can create release notes. We can do, all the facets that go into sort of building software. We're well positioned to take advantage of those and be able to create new products for our customers. But for some companies that maybe aren't growing as rapidly or don't have as much of a demand, then the situation is a little bit different, right? Companies will start to look at those productivity gains as opportunities maybe to reduce headcount.
Yep.
Right. So this also comes back to a little bit of, know your space, but also understand your company, your culture, and and sort of the implications, if you will.
What areas do you think they got those productivity gains where they were able to reduce that headcount? What areas of the business do you think that was?
Well, clearly, like this one's
customer support, right?
Customer support's a great one. Creative areas. Look at what's happened to Adobe.
Oh,
right. So if you're in a creative space,
yes.
And, we both know we both use creative companies, and both U.S. and abroad,
right.
To solve things for us, and those prices are really affordable in many ways because there are so many gifted people out there that can do so much creative work. Whether you're building logos or building websites or building different things, there's a lot of talent out there in the marketplace.
Just log on to Fiverr.com.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's like, so those kind of organizations that just not the individual contributor, like not the consultants, not those folks, but the ones that the companies like the Adobes that have relied historically on having sort of a bit of domain, separation from a lot of that are really going to, I think, struggle in the future.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. All right, let's move on. Number 4. Oh, this is the favorite one. So CTOs and CIOs' ambitions for the CEO role. All right, so CIO Magazine this month in an article by Beth Stackpole. Beth writes, the CIO to CEO career path, once unthinkable or at best unlikely, is happening more and more. Wide-scale digital transformation has positioned technology as the centerpiece of companies' revenue generation strategies, both as foundation for delivering and servicing products and as the primary touchpoint for customer engagement. The shift to remote and hybrid work accelerated companies' dependence on technology as a core business strategy and ultimately a driver for competitive differentiation. The ongoing changes have cast CIOs on the front lines of business, not just in a technical capacity, but taking on plus-size leadership roles. According to the 2023 State of the CIO, CIOs are more involved in leading digital transformation initiatives compared to business leaders, 84%. Service change agents, 85%. Have revenue responsibilities, 68%. And partner closely with the CEO and board of directors, 77%. So this is kind of a wow, right?
It is a wow, but not a
big wow, right?
Well, it's a big wow, but it's not unheard of, right? I don't think anyone should be like stupefied by that this is kind of occurring. I mean, if you think about it, the biggest challenge historically, it wasn't the breadth of involvement or exposure that the CIO or CTO had to the organization and the value they created. Right. Well, maybe a little bit in the value part, but it was that they didn't run revenue generation areas, right? So they were always perceived as being behind the scenes, keep the lights on, make everything operate efficiently and things like that.
And historically reported to CFOs.
Or others, or even CEOs in certain cases, but they were always kind of perceived as being sort of enablers, right? If you go back, if you now look at the last 8 to 10 years, like it used to be that you would say something like, oh, what are your goals? And they'd be around sort of operational efficiency. They'd be around employee productivity, and they still are. And but now they're much, much more around competitive differentiation. Right. They're around driving real revenue, real ROI, not just you get a couple projects that are positive ROI, but I mean like very, very significant ROI. The other thing is we all know, like in every company says it is, every company's a technology company,
right?
On some level, right?
Some level,
and so who better in some respects? I mean, I think the other thing that I think there's a bit of a wake up call to is, the CIO understands how the sausage is made at a company, right? And we all know that knowledge is limited. Like, I mean, on some level, we've had this conversation in past, podcasts where, a lot of companies, you could look at the metaphor of an iceberg, and some senior leadership teams, in terms of understanding the details of how their business operate really kind of above the surface of the water.
Sure.
The 10%, call it.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, you got an executive leader in the same presence of all those people who can go down to 60, 70%. That's a level of knowledge that if they also possess, the charisma to kind of work with the board and understand business, challenges and competitive landscape and all the other, how do we drive revenue, make money and stuff, and work with the CFO, they're incredibly well positioned, in the future.
Right. And I think of like the comment that you made about every company's a technology company. I mean, if you think about the insurance industry 20 years ago, you wouldn't say that.
Probably not. No, but it's remarkable.
And yet you look at it today and it is all driven by technology.
Well, and I think back to, my friend, Paul Brady in Massachusetts. And he works at Arbella Insurance.
Okay.
So he was the CEO at Arbella Insurance for years, like years and years. I don't even know, 15, I'll say.
Okay.
Maybe more. And recently this year became CEO there. And he's just a great, super smart guy, really knowledgeable, super understands the business. And I'm sure during that time period, gained tremendous, trust from the CEO and from the board. And he's a classic example, I think,
of exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you look at the time frame, 15 years, he was the one that probably led the digital transformation of that company.
Yeah.
Right?
And a lot of these guys are founders too. Think of it that way. If you look at how many companies are founded by CTOs, right? So they understand the business opportunity before anyone in many ways. They understand the opportunity. They understand the opportunity, but they also understand the risks and the challenges and how to build the technology, to basically support this new creative venture. And it's like the only thing they've historically lacked in many respects is sort of whether or not they're so in the weeds that they don't possess maybe sort of the aptitudes to be effective in front of boards and other sort of,
Right.
key people and things.
Right.
And, but anyway, so I'm not surprised. I mean, look at Bill Gates. I mean, if you kind of go back far enough, I mean, look at any of the founders. It's like, whether it's, Facebook or any of these people. These people were like technologists first.
I think, it's interesting that you say that, because I think of those companies as they were technology companies, right? Started by software developers and things like that. But when I really think about your friend Paul Rady, right? I think of that as a real transformation, right?
Me too.
Because you're talking about
Yeah.
changing an industry, right?
Totally.
As opposed to starting a software company, right? That kind of a thing.
Right,
So,
but if you
that
think-
to me is
yeah.
really profound.
It is profound, but
Yeah.
if you think that how much technology is a pivotal component of some of these companies, it's not as much of a leap of faith when you sort of get down to it, because who better to understand sort of the competitive landscape and your market and whatnot than the person that kind of maybe built your systems. And
I mean, to your point, I think it's kind of becoming like a no-duh now, right? Like,
It is.
It's not
Well,
surprising. It's kind of like, well,
it'll
no-duh,
be
right?
it'll be
Yeah, of course.
very
Yeah.
very interesting to follow this one over the course of the next 5 to 10 years to see how these trends continue to sort of evolve.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're going to see an uptick. I don't know that it'll be a significant uptick. I mean, I think they'll be well positioned and sort of small and medium sized businesses. As you get into larger companies, it remains to be seen.
This will be one we should really start tracking,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because you think about in your experience, you saw a lot of CEOs come and go at the Weather Channel, remember? And,
Sure, yeah.
and they were coming from marketing, they were coming from sales, right? They were coming really from the business side of things, and that's changing now. Like, that's changing dramatically, and so it'd be really interesting to watch to really graph that out over the next few years.
It will be interesting. I mean, the implications of AI. I mean, different skills. I mean, I think marketing has more opportunity than they have had historically, in terms of rising further than they have. And so it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
It'll be fascinating, because I think creativity, innovation, taking advantage of these new capabilities, emerging technologies, is going to be a differentiator.
Yeah.
It's no longer sort of just a little cottage industry.
Right.
It's not like the old days where someone threw somebody some R&D dollars and said, well, see what you can do. Now it's like, it's legit. People are making portfolio bets on the life of their business.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue into our fifth and final subject, which is Sam Altman and the AI bubble. All right, so a CNBC article by Dylan Butts, who is quoting a report from The Verge by Alex Heath. So we got a little stacked reporting going on here. But Altman is quoted as saying, quote, "When bubbles happen, smart people get overexcited," key on smart people, get overexcited about a kernel of truth. "We are in a phase where investors as a whole are overexcited about AI." Well, actually, it's stated as a question. Are we in a phase where investors as a whole are overexcited about AI? My opinion is yes. Is AI the most important thing to happen in a very long time? My opinion is also yes. The article went on to say that, quote, Altman appeared to compare this dynamic to the infamous .com bubble, a stock market crash centered on the internet-based companies that led to massive investor enthusiasm during the late 1990s. Between March 2000 and October 2002, the NASDAQ lost nearly 80% of its value after many of these companies failed to generate revenue or profits. And so the question is AI investment moving too fast? So this is interesting because I was around for that. Well, I've been around for everything. You and I have been around for everything, right? But I actually was leading a company at the time that was institutionally funded, and we were going from A round to B round, and the market crashed in 2000. And the capital markets just completely dried up.
So your opinion is that it's moving too fast, that there's...
You can see parallels to what was going on there. I mean, if I go back to kind of like the enthusiasm that was going on, it was a joke during like 1998, 1999 that, you could just come up with if you could just grab a .com name, like I think there was the poster child of it was barbecue.com. Raised like, don't quote me on this, but raised something like $10 million of venture money to get started. And so there was just this massive enthusiasm. There was just money flying all over the place for ideas that were not really fully baked, not really fully thought out, but it was the hot thing, right? Everybody saw the market potential.
Yeah.
And it isn't that the .com industry was a bad industry. It was that there was over enthusiasm and everybody was coming out of the woodwork with their idea. And you see that a lot right now, right? Like if you follow your Twitter accounts or whatever. I mean, are you just getting bombarded? I had to turn some off just because I'm getting bombarded with so many AI products, quote unquote, which are really just, wrappers around AI
Well, they're
models,
that,
right?
or I think the tricky part too is that there are differences between going back to the
let's hear it.
.com challenge and this one. I mean, like I look at the AI thing as like we're super early in the hockey stick, so there's lots of upside. Like not that
100%.
there wasn't a lot of upside on the web. Clearly there is, but we don't know right now in terms of the opportunity, the amount of how much all of us have learned in a super short amount of time,
right?
2 or 3 years, not counting machine learning and other AI capabilities that we've leveraged, but really more at the super technical level in the past.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the current number is for generative AI tools that are out there. I remember reading not too long ago was 2,500. I'm sure it's well over 3,000 and growing. I think the challenge that is out there is differentiation. It's like, how do you differentiate? It's like, how do you differentiate? And like, think about an analogy. Like, these are not similar industries, but if you think about the television industry, it's like it used to be, the business model is predicated on, market share.
Right.
Well, it's hard to. What do you do when you have only 30 channels? It was pretty understandable. When you have like thousands of channels or thousands of content sources and streaming sources,
right?
And you get Gartner trying to measure all this stuff, right? It's a little bit like that. I feel a little bit like with generative AI. Like if I'm a company and have a very novel idea, how do you get it out there to a CTO or CIO, so that they can even consider it? And I'll tell you one other thing that does worry me a bit is that a lot of these private equity companies that are promoting some of these different generative AI products, if you will, one challenge they have is the ROI. Like they want them to sell for real money.
Yep.
So like, let's take a number. Like I had a conversation with a few and they would like say, oh, I'm like, well, how much do you want for that? I'll say $100,000. And I'd be like, you know what? I'll pay you on the use case that you can do for me. Because I think one of the problems is that these things are, a lot of generative AI products are a little bit like a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
And like, I don't want to pay for the whole knife if I'm just using the spoon.
Yeah.
And so, one of the challenges I think we're going to find is that if you think about the Copilot capabilities or the Claudes
Gemini,
or even, it goes on and on, OpenAI, et cetera. Like one of the benefits they have is that they live a little bit, and I mean, I'm going to throw numbers at this, but call it the 80-20 rule, where they can address 80% of corporate need potentially.
Right.
And then the remaining 20 becomes sort of a, like a wrestling match for, a lot of very like high capable vertical AI services.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so you can see a lot of companies look at it like, I'll do the 80-20 thing. I might have one product or two products for this space, and I'll have, 10 to 12 or 24 for these vertical narrows. Like, oh, you want to do something in the audio space? This is the best one. You want to do something in kind of video? This is our answer to this. And so you're going to see, I think, that model continue to kind of evolve. But
the challenge, though, is it's real money.
It is real money.
Yeah. Not just in the product itself, but in the actual calls to the LLMs and tokens,
the compute costs and
compute costs.
Right now we're dealing with micropayments and a lot of it, right?
Right.
It's as micropayments become macro payments, it'll be interesting to see. We were talking about Salesforce earlier. I mean, Salesforce benefits from AI, but is also potentially going to be challenged by it too. And that challenge is there enough value that companies see in Data Cloud and Agent Force and products like that to, make them want to pay a higher premium,
right.
especially given that license costs are already high.
Well, and that's being tested right now.
Right. We see the same thing with other SaaS businesses like ServiceNow and others where we're going to have to, I think we have very early stage AI solutions on a lot of those products. And so I think companies are very reluctant to pay anything more than a modest amount. As those kinds of things evolve, however, and move from, micro to macro kinds of capabilities, and maybe even on the cost side, companies are willing to pay it. But right now, it's really, really early. And
how do you see that working, the micro versus macro? How does that work? How does that play out?
Well, take it hypothetically, right? Like, so if I'm using your AI product, right?
Yep.
Say it's on AWS under Bedrock or something like that. And you're leveraging Claude, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're using it internally for internal purposes kind of thing, well, you probably don't have that many employees such that you're driving massive demand. So when you calculate what your AI costs are, right? They're not catastrophically high.
Right.
Now, take those same solutions and have them public facing and have millions of people use those. Now all of a sudden, like, you're driving real money.
Right.
You know, and so you want to make sure that the value of the AI is greater than the cost. And that's where, you know, obviously it makes total sense, but that's where I think we're going to learn a lot in these in the years ahead.
Right.
I mean, so is the bubble, you know, is there an AI bubble? I mean, yeah, there's always a bubble when there's, you know,
something new. Yeah.
When there's something new that has, you know, a near unanimous agreement that it's going to be a game changer.
Right.
The question is
like automobiles in the industrial age. Yeah.
The question is going to be, is the slope of the curve steep enough to continue to warrant the investment in the differentiation of the products and services that companies can create, so that companies like ours can drive real value and are not opposed to paying a higher fee, if you will, for some of the AI costs.
Well, and the story here too, it really is kind of like bifurcated. I think its primary audience here is investors, right? This is about investments in AI, right? And so then the bifurcation goes to another layer, which is consumer versus business. So we tend to think of these, like, most of the conversation we're having right now is like our corporate investment in these things, right? But there's this consumer investment in all of these things. Like, there's tools like, hey, there's all kinds of AI tools out there right now for creating presentations.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
right.
yeah.
And then, so that's more of a consumer facing type thing. Now, you could, of course, you could have a corporate license around that.
Sure.
But there's a lot of these consumer of models, right? That are consumer.
Here's a foreshadowing, since we're talking a lot of foreshadowing today.
Okay.
You know, one foreshadowing that I think a lot of technologists that I talk to worry about, I do, is that we've moved to, you think, go back, I mean, we talked about this maybe on one of the episodes, but if you go back in time, you used to buy the software. So you know the cost. This cost X amount of money. And then Microsoft and others kind of went more to a cloud model, right? You know, more of a kind of SaaS-based thing. And so it was licensed, right? So you basically, it cost you X amount per license type of thing.
On a subscription.
On a subscription basis. Fine. But when you have a subscription, it's really easy to kind of increase the price. Like, you just, you know, like, and you can also create sub-components within the license, if you will, that have other cost bases. You know, so it gets easier in some respects to continue to drive rate increases. You throw AI in, so all these AI investments that these companies are making right now, like large-scale software companies, like, at some point, they're going to have to pay for them, right? And the most obvious way of paying for them is to raise the price of the software.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's many folks like myself, and if you're out there listening, you know, and you're a technology leader, like, you should be paying dramatic attention to your hardware software maintenance costs. Like, we moved away from CapEx, we moved to OpEx, whether it's the cloud or other services and things.
But that was mostly driven by the cloud, right?
It was 100%. But now you get SaaS products that operate in the cloud, right? Where, you know, that you're paying for, and these products are sticky. And so if someone now throws an AI fee on top of that, you know, like, who do you yell at? You know, if you're, you know, what do you do when you're paying for AI capabilities that have limited value?
Right.
Right? I mean, you know, we see it in every single product. I could buy a toothbrush with AI. I can buy anything with AI. What if suddenly, you know, the price of all these things go up because now we have to kind of recoup our expenses? Right? Like, and so it'll be fascinating. I think there's a whole field that'll be emerging, you know, when you think about it in terms of, you know, there's obviously, like, you know, IT ops capabilities or FinOps in terms of understanding what things cost. We're really going to also doubling down on hardware software maintenance is going to become a really, really big deal.
Right.
Eliminating duplications of products, you know, similar products and things like that, and making sure you're putting, like, you know, really sort of tremendous focus on sort of, you know, what do you license?
Yeah.
And so more to come in that one too, I guess. But I mean, is the bubble real? I think the bubble's real. I'm an optimist, I guess, right now. And so
I think the question is the are the investments moving too fast, right? And it could be.
Could be, but
also what I'm hearing from you is that the size of the hockey curve back during the dot-com bubble pales in comparison to the size of the hockey curve now.
Yeah.
In other words, it's not the same hockey. It's not the same hockey stick.
Think of it this way. This one touches all of us.
Right.
Right? Not that the cloud didn't touch all of us. We all could do different things with the cloud. But most of the companies that spent money on it were like corporations. Now everybody does, right? This one's a little bit more like mobility.
This gets back to consumer and business.
Yeah. So I'm sort of, you know, we're not done yet. I mean, I still think there's
just the beginning, right?
Yeah. And there's a big upside here. And I just think, there's a lot of investment. I think we're going to pivot to, like, more intelligent investment. Because pretty soon we're going to know which of these AI things really have the best bang for the buck, which ones have the most positive ROIs, and those will ultimately win the day, like any other time in our careers.
Yeah, 100%. All right, guys, that is our sprint for the week. Also, unfortunately, a few weeks ago, we had a major event in our country, an assassination of a young man that was, no matter what political side you're on, and this is not a political show, right? But no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, you couldn't help but be impacted by it, touched by it in one way or another. And so I didn't want to go and just ignore it, even though it has nothing to do with technology and the things that we do. But to wrap up, I'd like to offer this poem as a recognition of the enduring strength of mankind and our country. Across the prairies where the wild winds call, he echoes the enduring thrall of a land that bends but never breaks its vow. He speaks of harvest shared, of plows that plow. The furrows deep with hope for every kin, from city spires to the farm's quiet din. In love for this soil, this boundless domain, we find our strength and rise as one again.